2:17 a.m. The piercing glare of fluorescent lights cuts through the suffocating silence of a sterile hospital hallway, broken only by the frantic rhythm of heavy footsteps racing down the polished corridor. In that exact fraction of a second, a phone vibrates violently against a wooden bedside table miles away, buzzing with an unnatural, terrifying persistence that instantly shatters the quiet night. According to sources close to the family, it was during these dark, agonizing hours that the tragic news began to leak out. Iconic Nollywood giant Pete Edochie had allegedly taken his final labored breath at the age of 79 after a long, grueling, and fiercely private battle with late-stage terminal cancer. On the other end of that catastrophic midnight call was his son, Yul Edochie, whose world crumbled in a single heartbeat as the horrific reality crashed over him like a wave of pure ice. Unconfirmed reports describe a scene of intense panic and devastating heartbreak behind closed hospital doors, where heart monitors beeped erratic warnings while medical staff moved in a desperate, chaotic blur against the relentless, cruel advance of an aggressive disease. For long months, behind the quiet dignity that Pete Edochie always displayed to the world, a brutal fight was being waged against a stage 4 malignancy that slowly, mercilessly drained his legendary strength. Sources suggest that Yul had spent agonizing weeks watching his revered father, a man celebrated across generations for his commanding presence, towering dignity, and golden legacy, endure excruciating, body-racking pain, trapped inside a frail frame that could no longer carry the weight of his mighty spirit. Every single breath had become a grueling ordeal, every flickering glance from the veteran actor reflecting a deep, unbearable torture that tore through the souls of everyone standing vigil at his bedside. The emotional devastation on Yul was overwhelming. Witnessing the titan who had raised him succumb to the torturous reality of late-stage cancer left him completely shattered, paralyzed between desperate prayers for a miracle and the intolerable agony of seeing his beloved hero suffer in silence. As midnight rumors began spreading through inner circles, the shock felt suffocatingly real, with frantic phone calls bouncing between relatives, tear-stained faces illuminated only by the harsh blue light of smartphone screens, and an eerie, heavy dread filling every corner of the house. The initial fast-paced panic of those early hours slowly gave way to an unbearable, lingering stillness as the finality of the moment settled in, leaving Yul and his family suspended in a timeless fog of pure loss. Yul was reportedly overcome by sheer grief, unable to reconcile the mighty giant who once stood as an unshakable fortress with the heartbreaking vulnerability of those final hours. The frantic rushing in the hallway gradually faded, leaving only the distant hum of the ventilation system and a cold, silent room where a single worn leather wristband lay resting on the side table beside an unblinking, darkened monitor. 02:30 a.m. The oppressive silence of the room slowly stretches backward, winding time back through the months to the quiet, subtle moments before the nightmare fully unveiled itself. According to inner family sources, the dark shadow of the terminal illness allegedly began not with a sudden collapse, but with a persistent, dull ache that Pete Edochie kept carefully hidden behind his signature, booming laughter and towering posture. Long before any clinical diagnosis, the veteran actor reportedly suffered in private, masking those first insidious pangs of late-stage cancer so he could continue standing tall as an unbreakable pillar of strength for his family and millions of devoted fans. The narrative shifts to Yul's perspective, who was allegedly the first to notice the tiny, unsettling glitches in his father's carefully maintained armor. It started with brief, fleeting moments. A momentary pause before standing up, a shadowed look of intense discomfort quickly replaced by a reassuring smile, or a sudden, unexplained loss of appetite during family dinners. According to sources close to the household, Yul began pressing his father with gentle questions, only for Pete to skillfully deflect every inquiry with heavy wisdom, sharp humor, or a quick change of topic, refusing to let anyone worry. These brief, guarded conversations left Yul with a growing, uneasy knot in his stomach, a quiet suspicion that something terribly wrong was taking root beneath the surface. As the unmentioned pain gradually intensified behind closed doors, a subtle, haunting sense of emotional betrayal began to whisper through Yul's mind, not out of anger at his father, but a painful ache that Pete had chosen to carry such excruciating suffering all alone, rather than burden his family with the brutal truth. Those guarded glances, avoided eye contacts, and whispered assurances slowly unraveled into the inescapable reality that the giant of the family was quietly fading, leaving Yul standing in a quiet hallway, staring at a half-closed bedroom door that held a secret too heavy to bear. 6 a.m. The clock ticks forward into the darkening months as the invisible enemy finally tears through the illusion of health, driving the narrative into an escalating spiral of clinical urgency and sheer physical agony. According to whispers from those within the hospital walls, the once subtle symptoms rapidly metastasized into an aggressive, uncontainable storm, forcing the proud patriarch out of his home and into the sterile, unforgiving clutches of an intensive care unit. Family sources suggest that the Edochie family went to extreme lengths to keep the devastating diagnosis guarded from the public eye, desperate to shield the revered actor's dignity from the relentless glare of media speculation while he fought the private fight of his life. Yet, behind those locked, heavily guarded doors, the horrific reality of late-stage terminal cancer stripped away all remaining defenses, laying bare a heartbreaking physical toll. The legendary actor, whose iconic voice once commanded absolute silence across entire generations, was now reduced to fighting for faint wisps of air amidst the monotonous cold hum of heavy medical machinery. Small, devastating details began to paint a picture of unbearable suffering. His broad, once unshakable hands now trembled violently against the crisp white bedsheets. His deep, piercing eyes, once filled with boundless authority, grew clouded with overwhelming exhaustion and a raw, agonizing pain that no morphine could completely erase. From the corner of the dimly lit room, Yul stood frozen by the bedside, consumed by a suffocating mixture of utter helplessness and raw, gnawing regret. Watching the towering mountain of his life wither beneath a maze of clear plastic tubing, intravenous drips, and the rhythmic, agonizing beep of the heart monitor, Yul felt an unbearable weight pressing down on his chest. Every sharp, high-pitched tone from the monitor felt like a physical blow, driving home the terrifying speed at which time was slipping away. He was paralyzed by the agonizing realization of every unsaid word, every unfinished conversation, and the cruel irony that all his own strength was entirely useless to ease a single second of his father's excruciating torture. The rising tide of loss and emotional devastation reached a fever pitch in that quiet room, where the rhythmic metallic pulse of the machines seemed to count down the final precious moments of a giant, leaving Yul gripping the cold railing of the hospital bed, staring into his father's weary, fading eyes as the shadow of the inevitable crept ever closer. 10 a.m. The timeline accelerates into a chaotic flurry of desperate medical interventions, only to abruptly grind to a painful, agonizing standstill as the final days drag out, stretching every remaining second into an eternity. According to inner family sources, as the aggressive terminal cancer reached its merciless peak, time inside the hospital suite seemed to warp, oscillating wildly between frantic pulses of emergency care and an agonizing, heavy silence where every breath felt like a monumental struggle. It was during these prolonged, quiet stretches that private, emotional conversations allegedly took place between father and son. Faint, gravelly whispers from Pete, offering fragmented pieces of wisdom and unfinished blessings, interrupted by long pauses as pain surged and swept his voice away. The narrative expands to encompass the fractured perspectives of other family members gathered in the dimly lit room. A tearful sibling clinging to the memory of his proud, commanding smile from years past. A quiet cousin remembering his firm, guiding hand during childhood gatherings. each relative holding on to a distinct, cherished piece of the legend as he slowly drifted further away. For Yul, standing amidst these colliding memories, the internal conflict reached an agonizing breaking point. He was violently torn between a desperate, irrational refusal to accept the impending loss and the gut-wrenching realization that no amount of love, fame, or strength could alter the cruel trajectory of his father's failing body. Every incomplete word from his father pierced Yul's heart, compounding a suffocating sense of helplessness as he watched the unyielding giant who defined his entire world slip inexorably into the shadowed borderland between life and memory, leaving Yul trapped in the agonizing stillness of an ending he could neither stop nor escape. 15 p.m. The overwhelming emotional surge reaches its absolute breaking point, stripping away the hectic noise of medical intervention and plunging the room into an eerie, terrifying vacuum. According to some sources close to the family, there was no dramatic final outcry, no frantic surge of nurses. Instead, the shift arrived through a subtle, chilling change in the surrounding space. The harsh, rhythmic beat of the heart monitor, which had dictated the room's frantic heartbeat for days, reportedly faltered, skipped an uneven beat, and then collapsed into a flat, unbroken silence that felt heavier than thunder. In that quiet room, the sharp scent of antiseptic suddenly felt suffocatingly cold, and the soft, continuous hum of the oxygen pump seemed to die away, leaving a stillness so profound it sounded like a physical weight pressing against the walls. Unconfirmed reports describe Yul standing entirely paralyzed at the edge of the bed, frozen in time as the truth settled over him. He did not break down immediately. There were no loud sobs or sudden tears, just a stark, terrifying numbness, as if his mind had locked down to protect itself from a loss too vast to comprehend. A profound, hollow emptiness far deeper and more devastating than any cascade of tears could ever express. Around him, a subtle chain reaction swept through the gathered relatives. Hands dropped from bedside rails, unfinished embraces froze mid-motion, and tear-stained faces turned silently toward one another in collective disbelief, illuminated only by the cold glow of static screens, as the realization took hold that the towering patriarch had finally slipped away into the absolute quiet of the night. 21 p.m., the frantic, suffocating atmosphere of the hospital slowly dissolves, giving way to a low, agonizing ache as the narrative shifts from the immediate shock of loss to the quiet, lingering aftermath. According to sources, Yul eventually returned to his father's house, stepping over the threshold into a heavy, stagnant air where time felt entirely frozen. In the faint amber light of the living room, everyday objects had suddenly transformed into quiet, haunting monuments of a life that was no longer there. The classic, worn leather armchair in the corner that still bore the slight indentation of his father's heavy posture, the reading glasses resting beside a half-read book, and the polished wooden walking stick leaning against the wall. A brief flashback cuts sharply through the silence, a memory of his father sitting in that very chair, his voice booming with warmth and unshakable authority during a Sunday family dinner, laughing heartily as he shared wisdom with his children. The vivid warmth of that past moment crashes brutally against the cold reality of the present, leaving Yul staring at the empty chair in profound, suffocating emptiness. Family insiders suggest that in these quiet, solitary hours, a dark wave of self-reproach began to take hold of Yul's mind, spiraling into a tormenting loop of unanswered questions. Why hadn't he noticed the faint tremors sooner? Why didn't he push harder when his father brushed off his early concerns? Standing in the quiet room, surrounded by the physical, lingering presence of a giant who was gone forever, Yul was left alone with the deafening silence of his own thoughts. 23 p.m. The quiet weight of the night thickens, settling over the house like a heavy velvet curtain as the final, lingering moments of the story unfold. In the stillness of the darkened living room, the faint glow from a street lamp outside casts long, skeletal shadows across the floorboards. According to those close to the family, Yul remains standing alone in the center of the room, completely motionless, his silhouette framed against the fading light. Slowly, almost hesitantly, he extends a hand, his fingers lightly brushing the cold, textured leather of the empty armchair where his father used to sit. The house is drowning in an absolute, suffocating silence, broken only by the distant, muffled whisper of the night wind against the window pane. There are no dramatic speeches, no neat resolutions, and no final answers to ease the gnawing void inside. Only the lingering, ghost-like presence of memories suspended in the dark, and a cold, silent room holding the quiet echo of everything that was left unsaid.